Carl Jung spent his professional life opening the doors to the collective unconscious and teaching us about the world of the archetypes. But these teachers and psychologists are the ones who wrote the field guide. I've never once recommended a client to read Carl Jung directly when they first start integrating their anima or animus, and these 10 books are just a sample of the 22 books I'm going to share in this video that range the masculine and feminine spectrum. You've got most usable and most practical at the top. Hopefully you can see this. Please screenshot this. Moving down towards perhaps less frequently recommended. But let me put this down for a moment and frame out this video, because I'm going to try and do as much as I possibly can in about 20 minutes or so. Ultimately, the question of integrating your archetypes, or specifically your anima or animus, which is the inner man within a woman or the inner woman within a man, is a question of practicality rather than theoretical adventurousness. I don't suggest that you go further into this video if you're merely interested in a cognitive kind of mental thought experiment of what would it mean to go into your inner opposite, because you're not going to get much out of the studies. Even reading two classic books like King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, or Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen. I say classic, but this book only came out last year, and thank God it did, because this is the best book on the feminine archetypes, including their shadow qualities. I recommend that you get both in terms of immediate usability. The key question is, what does it mean to actually integrate an archetype? Because I've got years of experience working with clients, and when I'm actually talking about archetypal psychology rather than somatic therapy or trauma work or overall self-development concepts, it's always applied. It's never theoretical. We're looking at the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover as it relates to relationship, career, health, and personal spiritual goals. We're looking at the maiden, the mother, the crone, the queen, the huntress, the lover, the priestess, as it relates to the individual's life situation. You can be my guest and go ahead and read Carl Jung's collected works cover to cover, but I guarantee it's not going to give you the result that you actually want, because if you're really being honest with yourself, and this is me being honest with myself as well, the conversation about the inner masculine and the inner feminine, or the masculine and the feminine archetypes overall, is merely more of a highbrow, academically maybe slightly higher IQ version of the same conversation which is happening on reality dating TV shows of what men are like and what women are like, and how do we get along or bicker against each other. You've seen a rise in the last few years of men's work and women's work. You've seen men going out into the woods and pounding on their chest and doing rites of initiation, and this isn't something that I'm going against. I see the immense value in initiation, and you've also seen sister circles and groups of women coming together to share their experiences in mindful and meditative ways, and maybe also the trauma work that comes with it as well. There's a real resurgence of brotherhood and sisterhood, but this is where things start to get messy within a conversation on the anima and the animus. I get questions or comments like this one on a frequent basis where people appreciate that I include both aspects of the anima-animus conversation, and fundamentally, although I did a video on this about a year ago, and I think it's one of the top ones that come up if you type in anima and animus psychology, I wore the same jumper just for continuity, I've learned a lot through my client work which I didn't get to share before, and I want to try and make it really practical for you today. So once again, please take a screenshot of these 10 books. I recommend that you get them and read them more or less in the order that's presented. Hopefully that comes up. And once you're done with this, screenshot it on your phone, go into your favorite secondhand bookseller. You can also pick up the extended reading list of 12 more books. And again, this is just 22. There's probably 40 to 50 books on archetypal psychology and parts work that I could mention or bring up from this library, but it's just not worth your time. You only need to read as much as you can actually apply. Now that I've lost the attention of everyone who is like, this isn't what I wanted, I just wanted to kind of access my inner masculine or inner feminine, can I learn just to go deeper into those more soulful parts of me and doesn't actually want to do the genuine, hard, consistent work of integrating those archetypes, let's talk about some of the major themes in regards to the anima and the animus. I'm going to assume that you're already decently familiar with some of these concepts. We know that the inner masculine and the inner feminine are the contrasexual psychic opposites that exist within every man and every woman. You can consider the yin-yang symbol with the black and the white, the comma and the colon, and then the white and the black within each of them. You've got 80% black with a 20% white, and you've got 80% white with a 20% black, if you can imagine the symbol over here with the power of your own imagination rather than video editing spoiling the effect for you. The issue that I find with Anima and Animus work is that we're usually focusing on the wrong type of work at the wrong time, which is really controversial because I've almost clickbaited you into a video where you think that you're going to learn about how to expand your sense of self-identity and get a newfound rush of energetic potential from integrating your opposite, because it's a trendy, almost interestingly alternative idea of self-development work. But it's not what I see benefiting clients in real time. What actually benefits clients, by and large, is when they focus on their biological birthright, which means men work on the masculine archetypes, women work on the feminine archetypes. I have been in session after session with clients between the age of roughly early 20s to mid 40s, primarily in the late 20s to late 30s kind of region, where the major pains in health, wealth, relationships, and various spiritual aspects are not to be fulfilled by seeking the opposite energetic expression. And that's a controversial thing to say, so let me break it down just a little bit. What actually happens when a man is saying, I feel like I'm a bit too rigid, I'm a bit too bound up in my masculine energy, I could really do with accessing my inner feminine. That's a language construct around the idea of sensitivity and emotionality being a distinctly feminine thing, and at the early levels of learning about the masculine and the feminine, you need to dichotomize a little bit more between the rigid, linear, rational-minded masculine and the emotionally intuitive feminine, but as you go deeper into your inner work journey, these distinctions become incredibly limiting, and at worst, they will take you on a roller coaster into a lot of wasted time. The real way to make the most of this work, and if this is one of your first videos, I hope that it's like blowing open your brain, you've got enough books to last you the year, just please take this in. If you're a man, and I'm going to come to a womanly example in a moment, if you're a man and you want to be more sensitive and more emotional and more connected with supposedly your sensitive side, or just learn to appreciate things more, you don't need to go into maiden consciousness or Aphrodite consciousness or access your inner queen. You actually need to look deeper into the masculine archetypes that you've already been given, because most people don't look to the deeper layer. Think of the father archetype, for example. The father archetype initially would think of the father being someone who's about order, protection, provision, being the member of the community and the member of the family, the head of the household, traditionally speaking. But what's the deeper level of fathering? For me, personally, if I'm to vision the sensitive father or the emotionally calibrated father, this is the man who can go out in the forest with his son or daughter, wait patiently as they appreciate the sunlight together, to see the deer or see the wild animal and appreciate it together, and say, let's go see some animals today, going out into the woods and enjoying the beauty and enjoying the aesthetics of the moment. Maybe an arm around their child, maybe a kiss on the forehead, they're only small. That doesn't require them to become more feminine. That requires them to go deeper into father consciousness, because you've also got the lover, the warrior, and the magician. And again, there's more than 4 archetypes. That's the basic 4 quaternity, quadrated psyche model that gets us going. But the same for the feminine. An alternative example, to speak in generalizations, if a woman feels like she needs to be more structured, more ordered, and basically go after their goals in a creative, entrepreneurial, spiritual way, she might think, I'm going to integrate my inner masculine so I can bring order into my life. But what if she just got deeper into the queen archetype? What if she learned the wisdom of the crone archetype and actually went in? Because you are limiting your own identity and you're limiting your energetic possibilities if you dichotomize between masculine and feminine at the later stages of the journey. I'm not saying that you should collapse all distinctions between men and women. And again, if we return back to the beginning of the conversation, the whole archetype, highbrow conversation of integrating your anima or your animus is more of the, well, I suppose more intellectually leaning version of what are men like and what are women like. You see podcast clips on the internet of, aha, I got you, and look at all these issues in dating and romance and divorce, and women's characters like this, men's characters like that. We're having the same conversation, but in supposedly more of a sophisticated way. You're just trapping yourself in terms of developmental possibilities. The major issue that people encounter that then puts them onto the, I should integrate my anima or my animus, is that they get a bit of an anima or animus possession. Maybe the man goes into a moment of being hooked on the wrong kinds of women, or otherwise goes into what he perceives as an effeminate inner world. He's maybe not showing up for work, or he's just not there in general. He's avoiding the workouts, blah, 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 blah. And the inverse example of the woman who becomes hyper-masculinized, and you know the exact story. It's the same boring conversation. It's fundamentally stale because we're not peeling back the concrete at the very bottom, where the archetypes unveil, unravel, and just present a deeper level of understanding of what it means to be a man or a woman, energetically and biologically. Look into the archetypes at a greater level of depth before looking into the contrasexual inner masculine or inner feminine, because this is where the yin-yang symbol comes in. I don't want you focusing on, this is a whole yin-yang symbol, right? You got the black, you got the white, you got the 80%. Make sure you're filled out in your primary zone before you start specializing in that tiny dot. Yes, you do need everything to be complete, but there's almost this postmodernist trendy idea that we should equal out the energies, and of course it's also dysfunctional to go into a hyperpolarized man and woman dynamic. But how much can you realistically do in a single lifetime? When I've worked with clients one-to-one and they've been struggling in their relationships, or they've been reflecting on the poor partnership decisions that they've made in the past, or maybe the bad dating scenarios that they've stumbled into, it's a question of psychoeducation, not integrating the opposite. Psychoeducation is really where you'll get the major benefits, and again, you can read things like King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Douglas Moore and Robert Gillette. You can read this book, you can read that book, you can read more about the archetypes. There's so many different aspects of psychoeducation that if you just took the time to read these books, how many of them do I need to hold up? I can't even fit them in my hands. You won't be swept into this idea that you need to abandon your core identity to learn more about the opposite sex. You learn more about the feminine as a man, and you learn more about the masculine as a woman, yes, so that you can build out that 20% inside of you, generally speaking, that is the black within the white or the white within the black. But you'll also escape those old habits of being in dangerous relationships, wasteful relationships, or otherwise miscommunicating with your romantic partners, which, if we're being honest, is the major concern of most clients when they're working with me when it comes to these issues of archetypal energy. They want to become the most attractive, most well put together, most healthy, most inspired and authentic, dare I say, man or woman that they could be, and then attract a partner that they can have a relationship with and maybe a family with, or improve their current relationship in one way or another. This video isn't maybe what you expected to gain, but I've given you the books. You can really go back and screenshot these in your own time. I've explored these topics at length in my Shadowwork library curriculum. We have Module 2, which has 3 hours on the archetypes, followed by Module 5, where we're looking at the inner child. I haven't even got to go into the inner child. What about the little boy versus little girl, the inner 10-year-old versus the inner 15-year-old? There's so many aspects to subpersonality work, which will appear in the right timing. All I'm trying to emphasize is if you're in this rabbit hole, with the greatest love that I can possibly bring forwards, if you're in this rabbit hole of looking for more theory and more ideas and trying to expand your sense of self-identity by going into the inner masculine or inner feminine at the detriment of shifting the attention to a deeper level of insight into your primary masculine or feminine archetypes, you're missing out on the major energetic wins. You're missing out on the well-being, the energy, the motivation, the feeling of purpose, and it's why things like men's work and women's work are rising in popularity to have male-exclusive and female-exclusive places, because we are not in the 1950s anymore. Carl Jung was working between 1902 and 1961. The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, which I held up earlier, was published in 1959 in the German, I believe, and then 10 years later in the English. You have to remember that the original Jungian psychology was written at a different time, where there was more division between men and women in a very traditional and ordered way. So the thing that would be healing would be to break down some of that division and try and encourage a bit more familiarity with what women are like for men, and you get the idea. We are not living in that time anymore. Not only are we not living in the 1950s and 1960s, we are also, by and large, most people who are watching this video, probably yourself included, between about mid-20s to mid-40s, Carl Jung's primary clientele in the final 20 years of his life, if I'm remembering the statistic correctly, were in their mid-50s to mid-60s. They're in the second half of life. Women who've already gone through the menopause, men who've already peaked out in their careers, and they're going into retirement age. That's the appropriate time to be looking into your inner masculine or your inner feminine. Yes, glance there. Take a look. I know where my inner feminine roughly exists, but I don't focus on that on a day-to-day basis. I say roughly. I've done dozens of hours of work on this. I've done the active imaginations, the journaling exercises. I've clearly read a lot about the feminine archetypes. I'm interested in this, but it doesn't take priority over me doing more of the masculine things. And you avoid the cliches wherever you go. What the point I'm trying to make is, and please just take this for what it's worth, we are not in the 50s and the 60s. We are not in a polarized society where we're stuck in rigid roles. We are in a land of freedom. We're in a world of opportunity, and unfortunately a world of distortion where we're becoming increasingly dissociated and increasingly derealized from our own biological identities and losing touch with what it means to be a man or a woman. And people would know if they just tapped into more of the instinctual level and the archetypal level to really see where the energy floods back into their system. It's a generalized conversation. There are exceptions at the extremes, but the large majority of people feel their best when they're tapped into a healthy, radiant masculine or feminine core, and they're aware of the shadow aspects of, for example, the king, becoming the tyrant, the warrior, becoming the marauder, the magician, becoming the manipulator, or the lover, becoming the playboy, or maybe the maiden, becoming the coward, or the bratty girl, or maybe the queen, again becoming the tyrant queen, or the overly smothering smother mother kind of dynamic. The shadow aspects and light aspects of every single archetype do have a wealth of adventure for you to explore, and you don't need to do everything all at once. In the era that we're living in right now, in the 2020s, the majority of people, the vast majority of people, would be best served by doing somatically focused trauma work to come back into their bodies when we're spending so much time on the screens and dissociating our consciousness into all kinds of imaginal opportunities, rather than continually trying to expand their identity and becoming dissipated at the fringe of their own selfhood. You don't need to do everything all at once. What does it mean to really contain yourself and bring yourself in, and then go deeper into your own essence? Don't scatter, just go for depth, go for genuine depth, and then maybe in your midlife devote a serious proportion of your time to your anima or your animus image. And if you're listening to this and you're like, that's ridiculous, I don't want to do that, I understand. I likewise had that phase myself, but as you go deeper into archetypal studies, you really do notice in terms of your own attention, I actually have more of an interest in the masculine archetypes, or I have more of an interest in the feminine archetypes, and it's almost always related to your biological sex. Almost always. You may have a period of time where you're learning for 6 months about the opposite, but then eventually your interest will fundamentally go towards masculine or feminine ideals, in most cases generalized, but this is also what I've seen in client journeys over multiple years. Bring it all back. Bring it all back from this ranty video. You've got the books. They're the best books. I gave you the 10 best books I recommend frequently to clients. I gave you an extended reading list of 12 books that you can read. You can join me inside the Shadow Work Library curriculum if you want a fully structured, best kind of academic master's style plus very therapeutic style approach to all of this inner work and shadow work. I couldn't even cover everything that I possibly wanted to cover in either 3 hours of one module, so I'm not going to be able to do it in a single video like this. I hope that I've just tickled your sensibilities and brought you back to more of a grounded perspective where you psychoeducate yourself about the archetypes and you focus primarily on the ones which resonate the most with you, but also having an awareness that resonation points may change over time. It is a wild video for me to film. Please continue the comments down in the comment section. I respond to everything to the best of my ability, and if I'm given more precise indications to where the anima and animus issue might be applied, I can make way more precise responses. But please do check out the rest of my channel. I've got more specificity elsewhere. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed, and at the very least, please just take a step back from the internet, read the books, and it will all be much, much clearer. Paradoxically, you can join me in the next video, where I'm going to keep you in this YouTube rabbit hole of shallow information, but hopefully I'll also bring up a book or two, and you might be able to break the trap. I'll see you over there.